Cool. Well, welcome everybody. As we're rolling in, please take a moment if you'd like to drop some information about yourself in the chat, just a quick introduction about who you are and how you came to the IMP, perhaps. Welcome to a new webinar, the first of the fall, by the independent museum professionals called Effective Community Engagement by Museums. So hopefully that's what you signed up for. My name is Betsy Loring. I'm an independent exhibit developer with the independent museum professionals. And I serve on the professional development team. We're an all-volunteer network. And with me today is Laura Roberts. Laura, say hello. Say it with your voice.
Good afternoon, people.
And Todd McMahon, also from the same professional development committee. Todd.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all.
And with us today, we have our speaker, Jason Wallace of Blue Goose Solutions. I'll be giving Jason more of an introduction in a minute, but Jason, you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody. How y'all doing?
Thank you. I'm going to do a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar to the independent museum professionals. We are a network that provides a central hub of resources and knowledge and connections for independent museum professionals. We actively work to support those of us who are independent, strengthen our relationship between independent museum professionals and museums and with each other, and to advance the field of museums. And we'll give you more information about ways to get involved. We are an all-volunteer network, so more hands are always welcome. So we're going to jump right in. I'm going to stop sharing and quickly introduce Jason Wallace of Blue Goose Solutions. I'm going to read it. Jason Wallace leads Blue Goose Solutions, which is a firm specializing in community engagement for museums, blending expertise in public and digital engagement to foster sustainable, equitable relationships between museums and their communities. In addition to working with museums, his work includes high-profile positions with 3 White House administrations, traveling with Presidents Bush, Obama, Biden, and First Lady Michelle Obama, and Vice President Harris. He also serves as a cabinet member for Washington, D.C. Mayor Bowser, leading community engagement initiatives. So thank you very much, Jason, for being here, and welcome. If you want to add or correct anything in the introduction, feel free to do that. But I also thought I would start with asking maybe for your definition of what good community, effective community engagement looks like.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. No need to change it. I'm not a fan of bios. They're weird to me. I just have to sit through it and listen to it. So it's always weird for me to listen. Great group here. If you all can chat, if you haven't already chimed in where you all are from, it'd be great. Like cities and states, that'd be really helpful. If I can provide context of what I want to share. But yeah, community engagement is, I think it's understanding the difference between community engagement versus outreach. I think a lot of times they're used interchangeably, but they are not interchangeable terms. Engagement is, well, outreach is more like sharing out. This is what we do, kind of just talking to people and giving them information, to where engagement is more about listening and ensuring that it's a two-way conversation. So I would say the best way of engagement is when they don't know who you are and what you do, but when you know who they are and what they do, and where they're from and what their values are. But it's a two-way street.
Cool. Thank you. Can you describe the nature of the community engagement work you've done with museums in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're chatting, can I just give some context, a little bit more context around like what it is?
100%. Absolutely.
Let me throw this up here. I am, boom, hit this button here. So I'm a person, I am from San Bernardino, California. You know where that is? You might even know where San Bernardino is. It's near the Los Angeles area. It is known for, I would say probably most popular for like there was a terrorist attack that happened some years back. So it's mostly known for that. What it's not known for is the state of poverty, right? So it's 54% of the population live on public assistance. It has a higher murder rate per capita than Chicago. It is what's deemed from the mayor himself a broken city. It's been bankrupt for some years. And I grew up out of this environment. And the things that I've seen, and I'll share with this group that like mother was on drug abuse, substance abuse issues. So I grew up in this environment to where it was an environment that lacked hope. It was an environment that lacked, people to see the opportunities that existed. And had it not been for nonprofits, organizations, museums, just people that are working in the space to help other people, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so outside of my company mission, the work that I do, and I believe most of you may do, is a personal mission. And my personal mission is to be that person, the same person that has helped me become who I am and where I am, to do that for other people. And I've been able to do that, whether it's in different administrations at the White House, at the mayor's office, nonprofits that I've started. But I wanted to share a little bit more about just like personally who I am. With that, I also want to just pop this up so you can see. Share screen. Let's share this one. Some of the stuff I'll skip because what she already mentioned, but San Bernardino native, been in nonprofits, for-profits for some time, and I own my own engagement firm. There's a couple of photos. You'll be able to see some of that stuff that I mentioned. Look at the bottom there. It's the Obamas in Africa. You see me with the earpiece in my ear. I'm not Secret Service. I'm not taking a bullet for anybody. They give us earpieces. And on the side, there's me jumping out of a plane. It has nothing to do with anything that I've mentioned. But it's a fun story. I've never jumped out of a plane. The guy that was strapped to me jumped out of a plane, and he just happened to be stronger than I was. So that was my expression out of the plane here. I don't typically do PowerPoint slides. One of the most detrimental types of PowerPoint slides are those that are excessively wordy, where the presenter just simply reads everything verbatim from the slide. The approach not only bores the audience, but also undermines the effectiveness of that presentation. So when they asked me to do PowerPoint slides, I said no, but I will share with you a couple. This is a picture of me when I first started my nonprofit, been in the nonprofit space, the museum space. I was excited, I was engaged, and then I realized it was exhausting, right? And I realized I was tired all the time. I was working crazy hours, and I felt like I was really beat up from the mission that I wanted to do. So I felt like what I would do was work harder, right? And I would strap this Acme rocket to my back. And I would say, you know what, if I just put the mission of what I want to do and who the people that I'm serving, and I keep that in the forefront of my mind, I'm gonna get to where I want to go. I'm gonna catch the Roadrunner, right? And y'all old enough to know what happens next, right? It blows up in my face. So I decided to go around and look for like, hey, I need help, right? This is where we need help. And when I'm working with museums, this is the area of, okay, we've made the thing, we built the things on our own. We're trying everything really hard, trying to make these things work. But then now we need to get the help of either volunteers, we need to get the help of our community to also work with, right? And what happens is that if you do it the wrong way, you tend to attract the wrong people, the wrong audiences that can completely destroy what you're trying to build. So what I work with museums to do is to attract the right audiences using the right magnets versus the wrong audiences using the wrong magnets. So they don't end up like this, right? And so I decided to sit and think, like, how do I do this? How do I make this thing work? And a lot of this is through repetition. I've done it so many times in multiple cities. I've done it for politicians that are trying to gather votes, right? Or museums that are trying to get engagement, or businesses that are looking for customers. But the idea of the work is like, how do we drive engagement? How do we drive attention to the thing that we're focused on in a way that is equitable for the audiences we're trying to serve? And this is kind of where people are looking like, hey, I need help. So when they need help, they tend to call me, and I support in those areas. I'll stop share there. I do have a sheet that I'll show you a little bit later about like how I do that. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context to who I was and why I was, right? Like, why am I versus not just who am I, but that's some of the work that I do. I didn't answer your question, Betsy, but I'm going to give.
That's okay. No,
I want to give folks
that's great.
context. I didn't want to just jump in like, why should you listen to this guy? Like, who is this guy? What was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, it was sort of like, what do you, well, let me go back to which question. It was like, can you sort of describe what you think effective community engagement looks like? And maybe parallel to that is, or a corollary to that is, how, because you're doing this on behalf of organizations, and this happens to a lot of us as consultants, we're in between the relationship between the organization and the people. And so how do you navigate that the people, obviously you're hired for your skills, but you don't want the relationship, the community engagement relationship, to be with you. It needs to be with the organization. So what is effective community engagement, and how do those of us who sometimes get thrust into this do so in a way that keeps the primary relationship solid and going when we're going to bail when our contract is up?
I've done this for a hospital in Dallas, right? And usually when I meet with folks and I ask folks about their community engagement, I get two different responses. One response refers to the community as separate from them. The other response refers to the community as they are a part of it. And that'll kind of give me an indicator of where that organization is as it relates to their community engagement. When hospital they kept referring to themselves, and they kept referring to the community as two different entities. And then there's a museum. You told me not to mention names. I won't mention names.
Well, no, it's up to, I'm just respecting you as a professional, that you may not want to name names.
Y'all know folks. Y'all know folks.
We know folks.
That's cool. I'll share this one. I met with the folks at Indianapolis, and I met with them a few weeks ago. And when they talked about community, they always referred to the community as a part of who they already are, right? And I thought that was like, it's a clear distinction. They were like, yep, they kept saying we. They weren't about them versus us. It was we. So like, I first look at that piece to figure out like, where does the community fall in your current programming? Community engagement is not something that is, I mean, you can identify it as a department that does a particular function, but it should be woven into everything that you do, right? So while I may be the first connector between this organization and this person, in the particular individual or particular group or community, like, it's not housed within community engagement. It's housed within the part of the organization, and it's woven into every bit and part of it. Also, I don't represent Blue Goose Solutions. Like, I work for an organization that, like, if you were to go to some websites right now, right? Like, currently, clients that I have, you can go to their websites and you'll see me, my face, my name, and I'm like the VP of Community Impact, or the Director of Community Engagement, or like, I don't show up as a third-party person. Like, I am a third-party person, but for the purposes of what I am there for, that's not something that is known to the community. And also recognizing that every community is different, right? So, like, there are similarities between types of communities. So something I called hyper-local communities. So anybody live in Washington, D.C., I would say like Ward 8 is a hyper-local community. Like, what will work in Ward 1 will not work in Ward 8. I would say New Orleans, the lower 9th Ward, hyper-local. Southside Chicago, hyper-local. I would say parts of Crenshaw, Compton, and California, hyper-local. Like, if you're not from that area, and they don't know you and haven't seen you for a period of time, there's a period of trust that has to be built before you even get into community engagement. So understanding who that community is, and I think the biggest thing that I see with organizations, they don't listen. They just go. They just go, especially if they're in a community where they don't look like who they're serving, right?
Right.
They are not a part of who they're serving. Fortunately, I may not be from Washington, D.C., but where I'm from looks very similar to it, right? So I can talk struggle. I can talk on the same, I know what it feels like to not have a meal. I know what it feels like to be bounced around from house to school, drug abuse, violence in your neighborhood. I can speak to that from an honest and vulnerable place very easily for a person to be like, okay, this guy, he gets it, right? Versus somebody else who's never had that experience saying, this is what you got to do to clean up your community. Like I love that, Rita. Great point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's understanding that, like, if you don't want to look like a savior of a community, but it's understanding that that communities are different, they look differently, and not assuming. So for instance, I would say, like, in Washington, D.C., like, the Black community in Ward 8 and Native Washingtonians that are also Black are not the same community. Like, Native Washingtonians, if you've ever been to DC and been there, people will introduce themselves as a third generation Washingtonian, right? That's a part of their identity. And it's not the same versus somebody that comes from California that just moved to DC that has a different relationship with the city. So I work with a lot of politicians, so some questions I may just, talk in a circle. It's just, I'm part of the trade.
So you talked about working with Connect voters and some other things. And one of the questions that came in with the registration was, how are the dynamics of connecting to voters, different from connecting to museum audiences? Do you see differences, or is it more
No.
based on the community?
It's the same. I think at the end of the day, people have real struggles, real fears, real concerns. And as different as people are, like, there are some things that there's a through line through all of it, right? In feeling cared about, feeling heard, feeling welcomed, the feeling, like that welcoming feeling. Like, these are all things that, regardless of what you're pitching, whatever you're selling, whoever you're voting for, whatever the initiative is that I felt when I went there, I felt heard, I felt welcomed, I felt cared for, right? And then how does that look? That the tactics of how that looks can change based upon the organization, but that through line is the same for every single person, right? People care about their families, their children, like, those things don't change. What their futures, like, they don't change. So I think how you go about it changes, but, like, it's this. I mean, that's why. I mean, right now I've community engagement for museums, but that's mainly because the museums call me the most, right? Like, they call me the most for it, but, like, I've done it for so many different entities and people, and to be able to see the patterns. I've also done it, like, you mentioned my bio, working for George Bush, right? So I worked for a ton of Republicans. I worked for a ton of Democrats, and and when I say worked for, it's not like, okay, I'm a part of this machine. Like, I was with Kamala Harris. What's today? Monday? Tuesday? Today's Tuesday. I was with her on Saturday. When they get out of the car, I'm the person that meets them at the car, like, and that's walking and talking with these folks. Like, I'm shoulder to shoulder with, I was with her and Biden on Saturday. I was with, I haven't seen Bush in a couple of years, but it's like the Obamas. Like, I've shoulder to shoulder with these folks, and I've seen it at that level, and it doesn't matter. It's all this. It's very similar. People care about the same things.
So when, well, I'm going to jump to one of the questions that came in was, where was this question? It was good. So one of the things that museums do is try to have like a community advisory board for a specific project or larger. So how do people, like, what are the pitfalls in creating that advisory group, and how do people avoid those?
I think this is tough to say, right? I would say identifying, do you actually want the thing, or do you just want to be known for the thing? And it's very tough to say this, but I'm a consultant. I don't like, what's the target you're trying to hit? And a lot of times I get people that are like, hey, we want this community impact and change, but they're not built for it. They're not designed for it. They're not comfortable with it. And it's like, do you just want to do something of like fluff pieces and do fluff things and get in the news for doing it? Or do you actually want to do it, right? One of them, if you want fluff pieces, what you do is you want to go very shallow. You go very shallow and you go very wide. You can hit a ton of people in a short amount of time with a bunch of small convenings, right? That's how you go shallow and wide. That's how you get in the news, get in the paper, and you get, you go after donors, and that's cool to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what your goal is. The other side of it is narrow and very deep, right? And you're working with the same folks, and these folks feel like they have a level of ownership over your thing, right?
Right.
If
Which
you're
means you have to be willing to give them that ownership.
you have to be willing to give up your owner, because it's not like you're creating another thing. You're taking something that you have and you're giving it to somebody else that wasn't there at 2 o'clock in the morning when you were building this thing, that wasn't there part of the website design, that you don't know their intentions. You don't know, like they may not be aligned to the same things. And you're giving some level of ownership to a community and building it with them, right? They're not doing it, you're doing it. It's doing it collectively together for the benefits of the community in which you're both a part of, right? So this is specific to museums, but I think the biggest pitfall is thinking you're ready for something that you're not ready for. Because when you get in these rooms, the folks in this room may say some things you may not want to hear, right? And I try, before getting to that point, we have a lot of these conversations. We do a lot of internal audits to make sure that we're good to go. I had one client that did an entire presentation to an Asian community, and they had no Asian people on staff. And the PowerPoint slide had no Asian people in the pictures. And they didn't do anything. They had a bunch of awareness campaigns where they use different languages, like, different languages, a part of their cultures, to get people interested into their thing. When they went to the hospital to go actually do the stuff, nobody spoke the language there. So there was a disconnect there. So it's like, are you actually able to do the thing? And then I would say, understanding, another pitfall I would say is understanding that the loudest voice may not be the most voices. And sometimes you get one person, Miss Ivera, and she talked loud enough and she got 4 people with her, and you're like, the community wants to do this, but it's only those 4 people that showed up to that meeting. But the majority of people that could not, are not able to be a part of that meeting because we didn't make it equitable. Maybe we didn't have childcare services. Maybe we didn't provide food. Maybe we didn't provide an accessible location. Like, you don't get the most number of voices, which is a representation of that community. Another pitfall is having like politicians, like local leaders, that people that have been elected are not always like, kind of think of like in Ward 7, the council member in Ward 7, great guy, right? He don't run Ward 7. Miss Jones on 48th and 48th in Dix, or 48th and Nanny Helen Burroughs. Like, Miss Jones she runs Ward 7. They go through her. Or maybe it's the pastor of the church in Ward 7 in Washington, D.C. is the specifically in the Deanwood community is the largest. It's the largest concentration of churches in the country. If you ever go to that, it's a church on every other block. There's so many churches in the same area, right? But there's one church over there. This guy is the guy who actually people trust and listen to, and they rally behind him over the council member. But if you were an outsider coming in, you may call the council member. He ain't got no pool, know.
Cool. So you had shared with me when we talked that it was like 6 or 7 different sort of stages, or they weren't stages because you said we could do them in any order, but different
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
pieces of community. Could you pull that up and just talk it through? So since not everybody can read the screen, but
Let me see if I could do it without sharing the client at the top. I don't care. Whatever. So we can do it.
because I suspect hearing about all these different stages, that's going to be the not ready part.
There it is.
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect.
Okay. So if you could just talk us through those seven
Absolutely.
things.
So this is the
Yeah.
mosaic. I call it the mosaic stages of community engagement, right? So number 1, 2, and 3 are interchangeable. The rest are not. But this is what I typically see is when I talk to museums specifically, it has 8 stages. When I ask them about what they do for community engagement, they do step 4, and then
Strategic development. Yeah. If not everybody can see the
Oh,
slides,
they can't see the
so
slides. Okay.
yeah,
I'll
no, that's okay. But if you can say them out loud,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
They
Thanks.
they go through strategic development, and then they jump to external engagement, right? And those are the 2 steps. They go straight to what is our plan, and then let's start executing that plan. So what I do is when I work with them, we start at number 1 is community engagement alignment. This is the understanding around, you know, who is the community, but let's just get understanding of key terms. That outreach is different than engagement. That partner, like what is, we have different levels of partnerships, right? I have an equation, a partnership equation that I use to show like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. Sometimes it equals 3, or sometimes it equals that, which we can go into later if we want to. But I have like, this is like an understanding of, so we're all on the same page. When I use this key term, we all know what that thing means and why. Then we go into team building. Stage 2 is team building, where we like, who is the team that's going to be designing this, working with this, working on this? Is it going to be just us and my team, or is it going to be a part of your team? Usually, folks, it's like maybe me and a couple of members of my team, and then it's also, you know, their team internally, and we're working on it together. Sometimes it's just their team, and we're just, all we're doing is supporting their work and in ensuring that they are going the right directions and kind of coaching them. But that's that team building piece is number 2. Number 3 is defining your target audience. Who is, like, what I hear the most, I say, who is your audience? They say everyone. Everyone is not an audience. Everybody is not an audience. It's not unless you're Nike or McDonald's, and it can be your audience if you have a budget to do so. Most of the museums do not have a budget to do every single person. It is impossible to sell something to let's say a Black boy that came from Sudan, right? And then a white woman who came from Switzerland, and she is 80, and they say the boy is 10. It's hard to sell them on the exact same product with the same message. It's impossible. Different backgrounds, different countries, different everything. Everybody cannot be your target audience. Now, even if you have different audiences, or if you have the same product, you can sell them in different ways. Marketing, you can do messaging in different ways, but like defining who is our audience, which also means who is not our audience, right? This can be broken down into demographics. It can be broken down to like literally geography, like 5 miles at Martha's Table, we did within a particular catchment area in the zip code, and these 5 areas here, that was our audience. And we said no to anything outside of that, right? So it depends on who that audience is. Step 1, step 2, and step 3 are completely interchangeable, and that will determine the organization. Some people want to do the audience first, then they want to do team building, then they want to get alignment. Some people want to do, let's get alignment with our whole staff, and then we'll do our audience, and then we'll build a team off of that. So the first 3 steps are completely interchangeable based upon the organization. Step 4 is that strategic development, right? What is the strategy, the why in this, right? And with this strategy, people usually come up with like 1-year plan, right? Like Martha's Table had a 30-year plan, right? 30-year plan. I had a panel discussion with me. You heard of Don Peoples? Don Peoples is like a CEO, billionaire. He's one of the only like a few Black billionaires, and he's one of them. He flew out to DC. We did a panel. He and I and his son did one together, and he told me about a 300-year plan. And like being able to think that many generations down the line, like what is our 300-year plan? But like understanding where that community is. So for Martha's Table, the community there doesn't have 30 years. They're being pushed out. So like, what does that actually look like? Some places do have 30 years. So, but figuring out what that plan is over a period of time, which we can get into how that looks later if you all want to know. But those are the parts that kind of drive like the introductory, like this is why we're doing what we do. And then we move down to step 5. I made it gray. If y'all can't see it, it's actually gray on this thing. Everything else is colorful and bright and colorful. I make the internal audit gray. And that's because it's the most uncomfortable part of this conversation, right? It's the internal audit of like, okay, we believe we're trying to do these things. So before we actually go after these things, what do we need to change internally, right? I have a museum, and what I do is I'll say, like, let me see your budget. I want to see where you spend your money. Let me see where you spend your money, and I'll tell you what you care most about. So you want to impact this community in this area, but when you have all your employee events, you've never bought anything over there. You never went to a restaurant over there. You never, did any kind of services. Let me see your staff. Okay. You don't hire anybody from this community over here. You don't invest into anything in this community. Oh, you just want them to come to you. You're not willing to go to them. You're not willing to, like this, it's uncomfortable, right? Because then it's like, okay,
Right.
like in an equitable way, you haven't spent $1 in this community. So from now on, when you buy food for your staff, pick a restaurant from over there, right? Also, I can see that you gave away food in this community, but you did it right next to a restaurant that probably lost money, or you gave away free haircuts, right? But it's like a block away from a barbershop that lost money that day. So it's like, it's like we're not looking to solve the problem. We're looking to support folks that are already a part of doing some of that work, which we'll get into next. But it's like that internal audit is really identifying, are we really in a position to go out in this community without being called out? I had one client that had 2 Black people on staff of 40 something, 40 some odd people. One was a security guard, and they were wanting to do so much stuff around Black people and Black initiatives, and it was just like, like, like are we really, like, I mean, they weren't in the community that, I mean, we're in Washington, D.C. There's a ton of, qualified Black people that work here, that could work in this organization. So like, it's the part that we talk about belonging, goodwill, trust, from an internal standpoint, and then how do we weave in community engagement as a part of our internal work, right? Not just externally. What is our internal work around community engagement? What do we believe in? What are our values? As it relates to the community in which we've determined we wanted to serve. Next is, and then this next page here kind of talks about like the deliverables that come out of each one. So like this one here was an avatar, an audience, target audience. An internal audience has like training and development. We go into that. But the next one is a partnership development, right? It's something that Russell Brunson calls the Dream 100. And it's identifying first, very quickly recognizing that you are not here to solve a problem, that there are more than likely a lot of organizations in the exact same space that have been trying to solve this problem for decades. So you coming in saying, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z can offend many people that are already doing X, Y, and Z. So ensuring like, okay, like who are the people that are already on the ground? Who are the key influencers, the organizations that align to your mission? And making sure that, you don't go to somebody's backyard without first knocking on the door and, letting connecting with people. It also, the folks that have these organizations, they also have the list, the email list, the phone number list of the community you're looking to serve, right? So you don't have to go directly to the community. If you go to the Boys and Girls Club and the community trusts the Boys and Girls Club, that anchoring their goodwill in that community to you can do significantly better than not anchoring it. I mean, than just going out there blind. So we do that partnership development part. And I've done this with one client in 4 months, 5, 6 months, something like that. I've done this another client in 3 years, right? So it could take a long time to do this work, but it's very important. Next is, this is where most folks start, is our external engagement. Like this is where we're actually diving into dealing with the community, right? After all 6 of these steps, now we're actually doing the community engagement work. Like people do this first. I mean, some people do this without a strategic plan. they literally just say, okay, let's just start going into the community, and I'm like, without anything. And when you skip those steps, people then call out things that like, hey, how are you saying this, but you don't have that? Like, how is your, the only person you have on your team that looks like this or is connected to us here, or is person who, like, it's just, you see those issues there. But this external engagement is where either myself or my team will actually deploy into the community, or working with your team, not your team, but the museum's team, to actually go do the work. And then lastly, I have it as step 8, but it's actually woven into all of it, is the capturing and sharing, right? How do we capture data? How do we, how do we measure success? How do we capture stories? How do we capture the impact of that engagement, of the activities, whether that be on a marketing standpoint versus a just using it for development purposes to get more funding. But what do we like doing it in a way that doesn't look inauthentic and that doesn't look performative, but in a way that really underscores the value of the work, that and the change that we're making. And I mean, by far, I mean, I think the best that I've seen is the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. Like, when I met with them, and I was just like, why do y'all need me? Like, it was like, I was like, why are we on this phone call? Because like, I think, and I'll mention them by name because like,
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't mind you mentioning positive names. I just figured for your own,
they were
for your
on
own
another
dime.
level of like, they had all this stuff. They already had all this stuff. And I met with them 2 or 3 times. And the third time I was like, I don't think you need anything that I have. I think the path that they were on was like, as we were going through it, I think there was one they were missing, which they wanted to talk more about. But for the most part, they had it. And they were by far the best that I've met at like the point of like, usually at the point where they call me on, it's like, we're on fire. We did something bad happen. Now we need to fix this thing. So it's always like I'm operating from a -10, or I'm operating from 0. They were at like a 90. And I'm just like, they were phenomenal.
That's
Completely.
cool. So I thought, looking at the time, why don't we start taking questions if people have questions? If somebody wants to raise a hand or drop a hand in there, and I can just ask another question.
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead
Um,
and put your question in the chat.
Yeah, if you got questions
raise
in the
your hand.
chat. While we're waiting on that, I know you talked a little bit about, well, one of the things you talked about with museums was you try to get them to focus on their pain points,
Mhm.
which which in some ways it's sort of like there's their pain points and then there's their ignorance. So how do how do you get people focusing on their pain points and then realizing that it's because they're missing steps, or that
Yeah.
makes sense? I'm not
So
sure that's the right
there's 3
question,
areas.
but
There's 3 areas, right? I think a lot of people, I have one client right now that he was like, he's talking about the problem, or he's talking about, some people say, hey, here's the solution to this thing, right? I want to push STEM education, right? This is the solution. Some people talk about, hey, here's the problem, and then here's the solution. But I think a lot of people don't know what their problem is, right? So if you imagine if things are like, this is more in the marketing side, but like things are like a doctor, you're a doctor, right? And like, people don't know what their problem is yet, or the solution, right? And if they Google it, they get those WebMD stuff like, you do this and it's all these random things, right? But like, most people only really know their pain, right? So you go in there and says, my elbow hurts and I'm having this pain and this is what it feels like. And the doctor says, okay. They ask a lot of questions to kind of clarify and pinpoint what the pain could be, this or that, based upon what they know about that particular pain point. And then based upon that, they then provide, this is the problem, and then they provide a solution, right? And I think this is probably less related to you all at like to museums itself. And I would say this for you all as consultants of museums, right? You all are experts at your thing. And I would say that like, there's a good chance like you say, hey, this is the solution, or hey, this is the problem. Some of these people only know what their pain point is, right? They come to me, they're like, hey, we're not having enough X, Y, and Z come into our museum, or we're not having this, we're not having that. And I focus on the pain point only, pain point, pain point, pain point. And
right.
and then I make sure that people will believe that you have the solution when they know that you understand their pain.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
I understand. Okay, I get that this guy understands the thing that I'm dealing with in the pain. Therefore, I'm more comfortable with what he's deeming as the problem and the potential solution. So I only
Right.
focus on pain.
Okay.
And then I move on to problem. And then once I identify their problem, I then say, here are a few solutions. How can I help you with them?
Right.
Like,
Cool. So we do have questions coming in. Kate, I'm going to read this, but you're welcome to unmute yourself if I blow it.
hey,
But
come on.
could you talk specifically about what Indianapolis already had in place that made them successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's positive, so I can share it.
Yeah.
They had a they had a strategy based upon the informed information that they got from the community. So it wasn't based upon this is what we think this community needs based upon the stats or what we're hearing. It was based upon specifically what the people and the businesses and the organizations and the students said from that community itself. So they had a clear definition of who their community was and who it was not. They had team members that were not duly obligated to do things. A lot of times you have people that's on the community engagement team as a secondary role, but then their primary role is fundraising, or the thing the thing that they're measured by for their success metrics have nothing to do with community engagement, and they're volunteering a portion of their time to do community engagement. They had community engagement built into their work. They did the internal audits. They had it woven into their organization. They were consistent, like trust is built through consistency, right? And trust is the currency as it relates to community engagement. It's trust, right? And they were consistent for a long period of time, and they had systems and metrics to align with what they were doing. They were amazing. They were amazing. What they
Sorry.
needed, go ahead.
Oh, nope, you're about to answer my question.
Yeah, I don't think they needed anything. I think the thing that they told me they needed was the partnership development, which I thought they had pretty solid. And then I would say, lastly, the capture and share. They did an amazing job, but they had to tell me, right? But when I was doing my research before meeting with them, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know it. I didn't see it. I didn't see it in their marketing efforts. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to do it in a way to where they're authentic. But I would say they felt like number 6 was it, partnership development, but I thought they had that solid. I just felt like I should have known it before I got on the call.
Right. Yeah. So Chuck, do you want to unmute yourself, or just asking about a time you had a big challenge and sort of how you handled it?
It's not like an interview question.
Yeah.
I was
I
just curious about your process.
Yeah. I would say the opportunities that come across. I'm trying to think of a specific one. I think most of the big challenges I've had, which is when clients want the world. They want to boil the ocean. They want the world, and they want it fast. Getting people to show up to a thing is more of a marketing concern than a community engagement concern. So sometimes I get people that book me for community engagement, but then what they want is actually a bunch of people to show up, which is like, you don't get that through community engagement. You can get a little bit through outreach, but that's mostly marketing, right? Like we can run some paid ads and get the people in here, but it's like, does that actually align to your engagement issues? So I would say the big challenges, which I would refer to as opportunities, is usually I would say that piece around number 1 was that alignment, like getting people who've done things the exact same way over and over again to do something different. And they're like, why are we doing it this way with this guy? But it's like, well, has the way you've been doing it been working? If it's not, then maybe you should try it this way. But I have one rule. Right? This is the rule that I have several rules, right? But one rule that I have is I advise, I don't convince. I am not
Right.
here to convince anybody of anything. I simply advise on what the path is, and then you make a decision and we move forward with that decision. But I'm not convincing anybody.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that conflation of marketing, outreach, and community engagement a lot? Because that was the sense on our committee, that people often put that one-way communication marketing and completely misconstrue that as community engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I see that most often. Like with museums and marketing, the bar is set so low that it's easy to switch it around. Like it's like they're posting up flyers on their Instagram pages, which will not work for the platform. Like there's a term we use called algorithm, right? You heard the algorithms and the algorithm, yeah. Like the way that I like to think of it is that the platforms are not platforms, they're businesses. And these businesses are designed to make money for themselves, for their shareholders.
Right.
That's the reason. So what an algorithm is, if you are doing something that is making Instagram more money, they will share you because that'll make them more money, right? How they make money is keeping people on the platform, right? So if you are doing things that makes them less money, they will stop sharing you. That's the big term for algorithms, right? Like, are you getting more people to stay engaged or not? So with the marketing piece for museums, it's pretty low because most of them are just got flyers or just pictures, and it's like you're not really driving the thing home. You're not getting people to, and we can go into with another session, like how do you drive likes versus shares versus like how do you drive engagement?
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maya has a question, like, can you speak to equitable ways to evaluate community engagement efforts? And Maya, if you have a specific concern about that, feel free to unmute and ask.
No, nothing specific. Just, I think there's often kind of concern about kind of asking too much of our communities or kind of taking from them without giving to them.
Yeah.
And just curious about your thoughts about both at the beginning, kind of the listening to the community, and then kind of at the end, documenting and sharing, and just thinking about kind of the best ways to approach that from a way that doesn't feel like we're taking and not giving back.
Yeah.
Non-extractive.
Yeah, I would say that you ever seen that picture? I can look for it. It's a picture of like it's like three people and they're at like a baseball game and like one of them is on
Oh yeah, the old equity versus yeah.
Actually, well, I've always had a problem with that, right? Because like it shows that some of the people are taller than others, right? And it makes it appear as if the person to the right that's sitting on two boxes, that needs the two boxes, is naturally just shorter, right? And it's not a good representation of what has been happening into this country, right? What's been happening is that they're all the same size, but there's a hole, like somebody dug a hole underneath one of them that made that person lower. They're not born shorter and taller. They're born the same, and something was done to them to get them to that point, which is why I don't really like that one. But like the ways we measure it, right? It's like it's or evaluate it is it's based upon like first stripping yourselves of like the norms of what we would think. I learned like even down to like a resume, right? And how one resume made me look better than another resume. But like one person may be able to afford a resume writer and one person can't, right? At Martha's Table, in Ward, probably I'm not sure if y'all heard of Martha's Table. I had somebody come in one time and it smelled like weed and was immediately like disqualified. And I was like, wait a second. And then I started chatting with this person who was an amazing volunteer. And he lived in a household where people smoked weed. Like they all passed drug tests. They have to with the kids. And so he didn't have any in his system, but he was like, I live in a household where everybody smokes weed. And what I'm supposed to do? Like we all live together. So it's like that smell gets on, but so it's like, it's stripping away like what you think might be right versus wrong and ensuring that staff show up with that same way. And I think it's somewhat impossible because marketing works, right? Like I did this campaign at the mayor's office called the Flip the Script campaign, which shows positive images of Black fathers on buses, on buses, metro stations, trains throughout the city. And it was changing the narrative of how black and brown men look in the media, right? So 50% of the time, if you see an Hispanic person on television, they're playing a gangster or somebody who has something to do with crime. 50% of the time, right? The majority of the time with black men, they're seen as not being fathers to their children. They're seen as not being head of their households, being able to bring in money. So it's like, and those things have real life applications. So for instance, when it comes to judges, police officers, teachers, like it works like marketing. You're getting ingrained with the same information over and over and over again that you start to believe that black men aren't fathers. But then you get a CDC report that shows the CDC actually put out a report specifically around black fatherhood that says black fathers are actually the most engaged men as it relates to fathers. And just because a father may not be in the household or may not be married to the mother has no indicator on his ability to, bath times, homework time, school time. And there's a CDC report, which I can drop in the chat here, but it's like, but these things work like marketing, right? Because now we're told these things, so we believe these things. So I think
so in terms of evaluation, I mean, it's, you don't want to harm the person in the measurement, but then you do want to measure. So
yeah, I mean,
what are ways to do that? That's
I think it may vary. I think it may vary. I think it may vary by organization and by mission. But I do think that a good rule of thumb is like if your home base is in a particular community, and your organization should reflect that of the community, right? In every way, shape, or form, right? So it's like if you are, for instance, Ward 8 is 97% Black, right? Martha Taylor actually does a really good job with this. So, but it's like, is the representation of the people that are in the community also in your organization, in every way, shape, or form. So I would say that, but it changes. It does change.
Yeah. Cool. Does anybody else have another question? No. Okay. Well, we're at good time. I need to switch to our closing slides, but thank you very much, Jason. This was really wonderful.
Hope this was helpful. Really helpful.
Yeah. I'm going to share our slides about what's coming up. So this is who we are again. Jason Wallace from Blue Goose Solutions, Betsy Loring, Todd McMahon, and Laura Roberts. This QR code should take you to the Independent Museum Professionals website. You can visit us at indiemuseumpros.com or email us at info@indiemuseumpros.com. As I mentioned, we are an all-volunteer organization and a really great way to network with other museum professionals. We are on X, we're on Instagram at Independent Museum Pros, and on LinkedIn we have a closed members group. So go find us on those socials. And let's see. Again, if you've got the itch to volunteer, we've got 4 different committees around professional development, around community or member engagement. I'm thinking of what's the other one? Marketing, and then we're kind of designing the plane as we fly it, so there's a chance to get involved in that a little bit. Also, we have a fairly newly launched listserv, which I highly recommend. It's a great place if you're looking for somebody to collaborate with, or you've got a question about non-payment or how to structure. It's been a really active group, so I would strongly recommend joining and then hopping into the listserv as well. And we have a survey coming up, and hopefully Todd or Laura are dropping that survey in the chat. This is asking for feedback on this session, and also we love to gather ideas for future webinars. And finally, we've got some upcoming events. If you're going to ASTC, other Science and Children's Museum folks, on Saturday during the lunch in the exhibit hall, I will be there with Paul Orselli for a meetup. We're also doing a meetup at the reception on the Friday night. So if you want to meet in 3 dimensions, that's a chance for those of us going to Chicago. And then we have 2 upcoming webinars that we know, one on October 10th at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, about building networks. So the independent museum professionals, how we can be separate businesses, but find ways to collaborate and use our networks. And then finally in November, Mistakes Were Made, the small business edition. If you've ever attended one of the Mistakes Were Made sessions at a conference, this will be that, except focusing on mistakes that we've made as business people. The clause that turned out to be critical that we forgot to put in our contract, and how to get that non-payment taken away. So give a look on our website to come with those, and thank you all very much. Again, if you could fill out that survey, that would be great. A recording of this will be going up in a couple of days on the website. But thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jason. Really, oh, look at everybody dropping everything in the chat. So thank you all. Laura, anything I've forgotten?
I don't think so. Looks great. The interdependent museum professionals are going to be Amparo Lehman,
Yes.
Paul Orselli, and Sari Boren.
Right.
Mistakes were made is being organized by 2 of our members, but it's collaborative. Everybody has a part in this one.
Exactly. Yep. So I think that is that. I think I'm going to stop recording. Oh, all those thank yous. Oh no, somebody else has to stop the recording. Whoever started it.